Let's take a look at how to use the Generative Fill AI options in Adobe Photoshop. Sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't. Here I have a photo that I took on my phone and have imported it. You can see that sizing here. And then I've added a couple layer masks to that adjustment layers for levels and color balance. What I want to do is attempt to fill in the computer screen here with some different content. Right now it's showing a YouTube video of, I think, some sort of local government meeting. But let's assume we wanted to fill it with something else. I can highlight that area using my selection tool, and it already gives me this option to do generative fill. There's some other options here as well, but let's say we wanted to fill this in with, let's say, a Zoom call. Now what you put in this prompt matters a lot. So let's try our most sort of generic thing and see what happens. Sometimes it takes a little while to generate it, and sometimes it will use contextual clues in your images if there are any. In this case, I'm hoping it is making use of recognizing a laptop, but it's not the most obvious laptop, so it might not get that aspect. Okay, it's finally done. And once we see it completed its sort of generative process, there's a new layer created in my layers panel. It includes the prompt that I put in, so if you're doing multiple things, you can remember. And it's labeled as a generative layer. This operates like any other layer, so it's showing me the layer mask there in the area that I selected, and I can manipulate it the same way I would with any other image layer. Now, this is not a great option. This does not look like a Zoom call. It's very blobby. It's also like weirdly black and white, and they usually give you three options here. I'm going to go ahead and say that none of those are very good, and you can actually provide that feedback to the program by saying, good or poor if you want, or you can see if you see anything really bad, you can report it. If you're like, I want some other variations, but not this one, you can do that. We're going to take a step back and try something a little bit more specific. So I'm going to go back to where I picked my sort of lasso area, going back in my history panel to go back a few steps. I'm going to click generative fill again, but this time I'm going to try something else. Maybe we say computer screen of video call with 9 participants. If you can be more specific about what you actually want to see, this will usually help create results that are a little bit closer to what you want if you are going for something specific. Sometimes you can just kind of see what it does, and that's useful as well. These kind of elements that seem like they should be really straightforward, like computer screen type elements, are actually some of the hardest for AI to do reliably right now. Because it's based on pixels, it doesn't necessarily recognize things like icons should have sharp edges, or it cannot necessarily do meaningful text in a way that can be kind of distracting. So even some of these prompts, we feel like, oh, if it's about a computer, maybe AI would be better at it. That's not necessarily the case. Okay, well, that is closer to what we wanted. It is also pretty weird, not real believable, even kind of horrific. Let's zoom in there. Yikes. Let's go ahead and see the other options we got. Ooh, all right, okay. And that's not even 9. I'm not sure what they're doing there. Some of these are pretty cool. We've also got like fist face guy, or I don't know what's going on with all these faces. So this is a good example of where the quality is at with Adobe Photoshop right now in 2025. If you update your software, you sometimes get newer versions of this, but it's definitely still a work in progress for a lot of things. Let's go ahead and hide this just so you can see that this works like any other layer. I can just hide that and go back to my original. Let's try something that it's a little bit better at. I'm going to go ahead and make a box kind of in the background here. And let's go ahead and try to add like a vase on the desk. Small bud vase with flower on desk. Now, things like greenery, flowers, trees, that can also be pretty hard for AI because we know those things being three-dimensional are connected in certain ways, but in images they aren't always represented with that sort of 3D fullness. So things like believable greenery continue to be somewhat difficult for AI to generate, but let's go ahead and see what it comes up with here. Okay, cute. There's some other variations we can look at. Again, here's another one. Nice. Okay. I wouldn't say they really look like they're on the desk, but fairly cute. And you can see that I can still manipulate this as a layer. Let's go ahead and try to make this one work. So I can go ahead and transform this layer the same as I would if it was any other part of my document. And we can even line it up with where that desktop is. Maybe make it a little bit smaller. And let's say we were like, you know what, this is fine. It doesn't really look like it's on the desktop, so I might try to regenerate that one. But if we liked it the way it is, note that we can still manipulate this as a layer. So right now, a little bit of that rectangle is on top of the notebook here. But this is over in a layer mask. So if I go to my layer panel, I can click on the masking portion of that, not the graphics part, but the masking part. And this just works the same way, where anything white is showing and anything black is not showing. So if I go over to my palette over here to pick my colors and I'm on black and I can pick any tool like a paintbrush, this works the same as any layer masks. I can just paint over a portion of that. I could also notice that like some of these edges aren't very clear. I could go ahead and soften those if I wanted to get really into this. And that's what people are doing, is you can generate elements and then do some of your regular techniques in Photoshop to make them blend into the scene more accurately. I could also try this again. Now, one of the best uses of AI is for removing elements. Sometimes it's not great at generating new things, but let's go ahead and say I don't want this to say reporter's notebook because I just want it to be a little bit more generic than that. I can highlight this portion, and right now it is still on my adjustment layer. I do need in my layers panel to go back to the original image so it knows what to affect. I'm just going to say content aware fill. So again, let me show you that again. So this is, instead of generative fill, I'm going to the paint bucket here, saying content aware fill. And it does its best to kind of like fill it in. I maybe didn't need it to make like those extra lines and stuff, but that is just kind of repeating elements from this notebook, trying to fill that in with something that is different. And this is a good way to sort of delete elements you don't want, or sometimes repeat a pattern, especially if you need to extend something beyond the bounds of the original image.